Hey everyone, I'm Nolly and we're back with another GGD drum library. This is probably our most characterful, heavy drum library to date. It's One Kit Wonder Brutal. Now the goal with Brutal was to capture sounds that are more extreme than we've done in the past and kind of create a drum library that's suitable for a variety of extreme metal styles. That it's got a kind of raw edge to it, which could be very applicable for kind of more lo-fi sounding metal, but also that the actual tones in there are really punchy and captured in a modern way, so they could be used for everything through to kind of hyper-modern, industrial, kind of post-apocalyptic metal. So the genesis of this kit came about when I was talking to many people in the kind of extreme metal genres, and they kind of gave me some ideas of sounds that might be appropriate. And there was actually a bit of correlation between these different genres. So the kinds of things we're aiming for here are, you know, if you think about that kind of raw Joey Jordison sound, but then at the same time, if you think about the kind of Mick Gordon, kind of very processed, kind of industrial metal sound, and then also, you know, to think about more traditional Florida death metal as well. And this is kind of where the circles of the Venn diagram overlap between those kind of three sounds, I guess. So in terms of what we've got for the kit, we've got a quite high-tuned 13-inch snare, so it's really pingy, which I love the sound of, but it's also still got plenty of kind of body and attack to it. And I think this is actually a snare sound which is super popular in metal at the moment. So I think lots of people are going to like that. We've got very short-sounding kick drum. We've actually got concert toms for the first time. So those are toms that don't have the resonant heads. And what that gives you is a very deep, kind of almost more tribal sounding tom sound with very little sustain. So it's something very unlike anything we've had in any other pack to date. And then we've got an array of cymbals which are slightly damaged in some cases, but pristinely captured and basically just really leaning into that post-apocalyptic sound design kind of idea. So not all of them. The key, you know, your main crash, your ride, your hi-hats, those are completely, you know, fresh cymbals, but the other crash positions, the stack and even the china have varying degrees of wear, from like a tiny bit of a crack, which is just giving like a more trashy sound, for example, to the china, all the way through to that far left crash, which, as you can see in the GUI, has big chunks missing out of it. And that was actually inspired by talking to a local studio owner who did a lot of really kind of technical death metal and quite old school sounding death metal records. He was closing his studio and he sold me a couple of cymbals, some of which featured in this pack. And he was telling me how much he really enjoyed the sound of those kind of slightly destroyed cymbals. And he'd often have drummers use those and they'd kind of fall in love with it for that more aggressive sound. None of these, as you'll hear, have like kind of audible rattles and kind of ugly broken sounds to them. They're all just a bit more trashy and perhaps shorter sounding than they would be otherwise. So I've talked about the sounds quite a lot. Let's check them out. I'm going to first of all click through the kit pieces on the GUI and then we'll hear it in action. So kick to start with. So yeah, those are those concert toms, which, as you can hear, are just completely different sound to anything we've done before. So cymbal-wise. So as you can hear, there's some really characterful sounding cymbals there, including the massive Mega Bell ride. That's a 24-inch peisty, rude Mega Bell type ride. It's a bit of a cult favourite, and I'm really glad to finally use that in a drum sample library. So yeah, let's get into hearing what this sounds like in action. I'm going to use the fantastic Joe Hamilton from GGD's song that he wrote for the release of this. He's done a great job demonstrating what this kit can do. First of all, I'll show you what the kit sounds like just on its own, and I'll bring in the whole backing track. And just to mention, I have two plugins going on here. I have, on the stereo bus, I have a kind of SSL bus compressor style plugin, just Logic stock compressor, and then I have Cradle's God Particle, which is an amazing kind of finalizer and limiter, which I've been using quite a lot these days, actually. So those two plugins are just kind of going to glue the mix together. I'm actually going to bypass the bus compressor just while we're hearing the drums in solo, and then bring it back in again when we're listening with the band. So here we go. and in context. So as you can hear, it's capable of quite a lot of different sounds within the heavy music space. I mean, it's actually really good at the Gojira thing as well, especially with that Mega Bell ride. And it is also a very deep sampled library. So there's a lot of dynamics to play with. You can get your snare rolls sounding really good, and you can really dial in that stuff, which is so important, especially when you're doing really fast stuff. If you've not got the dynamic range in the samples and you're not able to humanize it, then it can end up sounding very kind of drum machiney, and this definitely doesn't. So to talk about One Kit Wonders in general a little bit, because I think I've covered, what Brutal itself is all about. On the GUI, you can see we've got a few things you can interact with. We've got the CPU scaling. So at the highest level, this is going to have basically allow the most samples to be played back simultaneously, and it's going to use more CPU and RAM. In medium mode, you're probably still not going to notice much difference 99% of the time, but it is going to be cutting off samples that were played quite a few hits ago in a way that in high they'll just be allowed to kind of ring out to their full lengths. And then in low, you'll notice more degradation in quality, especially for really fast stuff. You might notice certain hits from the past kind of cutting off, but it's going to use a lot less CPU. So that's a good option if you're using this in a tracking template. But I'd recommend if you're going to bounce something out to switch it into medium mode. And in general, I think most people get on just fine using it in medium mode. In terms of other buttons, we've got the parallel and master EQ switches, which we've carried forward from all of our other One Kit Wonders. So these bring in an overall parallel compression and an EQ across the whole kit as well. Those go a little bit further towards giving you a final sound. For tracking, definitely just leave those on. That's going to have the kit sounding as polished and kind of compressed as you'd want it. Perfectly usable for a final mix, let's say. Although you might want to tweak things a little bit anyway. If you were to want to mix and want a little bit of a drier, rawer sound, you could get rid of both of those and do your mixing on top. And to do that, you'd want to access the mixer, which gives you a more limited channel count than we get in our full libraries, but still plenty to get on with. You've got kick, snare, so that's a sum of top and bottom snares. And the kick also had multiple microphones that were summed together. We've got 3 toms, overheads, we've got a dirt mic, I'll show you what that sounds like in a second, and also room channel, which actually is multiple room tracks summed together through there. You can choose to route these to different outputs as you see fit by clicking the little drop down arrow. So in this case, I've just been using it through a stereo out, just using it in stereo mode, but you can split out each channel from this mixer into channels on your DAW, and then you'll be able to mix away to your heart's content if you want to add some more processing to it. Also worth noting is the balance control. This gives you slightly different options depending on if you're on one of the shell close mics or if you're on the overhead, dirt and room channels, which I'll show you in a second. But this allows you to adjust the volume of that kit piece in the other microphone. So close is going to adjust this close mic volume on that fader. However, the overhead, dirt, room controls, this is going to adjust how loud, in this case, the kick is in the overheads, the dirt channel and the rooms, and also how much you want to send to the reverb. So there is a built-in reverb. That's always going to come through outputs 1 and 2. That's just the way that Kontakt works. You've got also a global control for the reverb here next to the master out. So if you've got the reverb being sent at different amounts on each channel, but you still want to be able to overall control how loud the reverb is, you can use the fader that's here on the left, and that's always going to be there. So let's take a listen to some of these individual channels, particularly the dirt. In fact, let's start with that one. So this is a microphone which is kind of right in the middle of the kit, almost pointed at the drummer's knee. And I specifically used quite a kind of funky old dynamic mic. It's actually meant for news reporters, like an omnidirectional handheld dynamic mic. It sounds pretty grungy. We've also distorted and compressed it a little bit. And this is what it sounds like. So I'll just bring that fader right up, and I've got it in solo already. So it's a kind of grungy, lo-fi distorted mono mic. Bringing it up under the whole drum mix can be very effective though. Check this out. It just adds a certain kind of ambience and kind of glue to the kit. Obviously you could take that and process it more if you wanted by multi-outing that into your DAW. But I really like what that does for this kit. Again, you can adjust a few different things. So you can adjust independently the levels of the hats, the ride, and then the rest of the cymbals as well as sending it to a reverb. The room channel. It's a really nice sounding room, really lovely sounding kind of decay to it. It's not super big, it's not super small either. What I did there was just to bring down the level of the cymbals and increase the level of the snare in that, and that can become really effective if you do want to have a bit more of an explosive snare sound. So now that I've made those adjustments, let's see what that does to the mix. So that's a really cool channel to have at your disposal, and by adjusting how much or how little of that you have, you can get a very drastically different drum sound that could be appropriate for, well, all sorts of different styles of metal. Let's now check out some of the included snapshots. So these are kind of mixed presets. So I named these as though they were really bad metal bands. So Begin the Bloodshed is kind of just a good default starting point, akin to what we were just hearing. Dark Crustacean. So as you can hear, it's gotten darker, the master EQ's gone off, and we've brought up a lot more of the dirt mic in there, and it's sounding a bit grungier. I think it's a really cool sound. Cleanse the Unclean. So this one's got the master EQ on, but the parallel off, and I can hear there's a lot more of the reverb and less of the room going on. So this, as the name might suggest, is kind of cleaning up the sound, making it sound a little bit more kind of pristine. Inside the Chamber. So this one's really reverby. So that's pretty cool for your kind of underwater cave kind of vibes. Reduced to Dirt. So this one's the dirt channel only with a specific kind of blend of stuff and with the master EQ off. This could be cool for a kind of mono lo-fi moment in a song. Kind of more an effect sound really. Verb the Reverberation. So again, this is more reverby, and I think that name is referring to the fact, yeah, there's quite a lot of reverb sound on the room mic. So you're hearing room, but then also quite a lot of reverb on the room. So it's giving an extra extended sound. It's a bit more doomy. I really like how that sounds actually. Within the Airlock, so this is just like completely dry. And finally, Release the Controls. Just flattens everything. So everything is at unity across the board. There's no reverb on anything. Parallel and master EQ are off. So that's basically as raw a drum sound as this plugin is capable of, which actually still leaves you plenty of headroom for doing some interesting mixing of your own on top. And then let's look, we've got the settings page. So here you can load various maps. You can adjust the velocity curve. So this is particularly useful if you're an e-kit player. Something which you can do on this page, which is worth mentioning, is you can adjust the volume of individual articulations without adjusting the rest of the articulations of an instrument. So for example, if you wanted to make the pedal hi-hats louder, you can click and drag on that number next to the key, and that will adjust the volume just of the pedal hat, so it won't affect how loud all the other articulations are. So then finally, we've got the Grooveplayer. We've got this ever-burgeoning number of artists creating amazing MIDI for us. I highly recommend checking out the various MIDI packs that we've got. They can be so good for getting inspiration started and also for just kind of fleshing out ideas, whether you're a drummer or not. I mean, there's so many amazing drummers doing some pretty unique and interesting things. I just highly recommend checking them out. So yeah, One Kit Wonder Brutal. This is our most characterful, heavy One Kit Wonder to date. And I really look forward to hearing what you guys do with it. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave a comment below wherever you're viewing this. And I highly recommend checking out the Get Good Drums forum on Facebook. There's a really great community of people there sharing music and talking about drums and mixing. And finally, if you want more information about this pack and all of our other products, make sure you head over to getgooddrums.com.